Hey, everybody.
Hey!
Welcome to Plots and Politics with the amazing Corinne Strait, and I'm Sarah Blessing. And today we are touching on Women's Month, women in U.S. history, what actually happened, the truth, not the watered down version, and how it applies to what is happening now in 2025. The things that American history did back then is still messing with women's rights and freedoms today. Let's get into it. I'm ready for Corinne to blow my mind with her fascinating things that she's going to teach me. I always thought I knew a decent amount of American history, and I love learning this extra stuff. So, I also want to say with these last couple weeks, just how thankful I am that I get to be friends with this amazing woman over here, Corinne Strait.
It's so exciting, Sarah. And no pressure. I hope that I don't completely blow your mind, because I know you've got a bit of a headache today. So feel free to turn my volume down, because I've been told that I'm loud.
No. You should be louder. I love that voice, girl.
I just
that come out of your mouth. Beautiful.
I just project. It's a natural. I have a natural microphone. It is Women's Month. We did a series in February when we were talking about Black History Month, and for Women's Month, I wanted to highlight a couple of key areas in history. And I just wanted to start as two women who grew up in Indiana. As you were growing up, when you heard the word feminism, what did you think, or what was conjured in your mind?
I was brought up in a pretty religious household, and my parents were very empowering on women's rights. But the church and the youth group I went to was very, the man should be in charge. The man should be in charge of money. I had a lot of brainwashing with that. So I always considered myself a feminist, but I didn't know what that meant until really, I'm going to say Emma Watson. Is that her name? The Harry Potter actress? Yep. She really helped come out and define what it meant to be a feminist. So it wasn't until years later. I'm going to say it had a negative tone.
Yeah.
It had a negative tone when I was growing up, and I'm 44. So
yeah. I'm 41. And it was the same thing. It definitely was not, we were a religious household too. We weren't incredibly conservative at home, but we certainly did not talk about race or gender issues or anything like that. I do remember my mom saying at one point very early on, maybe I was junior high or high school and talking about the Bible. And she said, well, let's remember who wrote the Bible. And it was her saying men wrote it. So let's be real careful of what is a morality tale. And that was kind of, I don't know if my mother considers herself a feminist. I don't know if she ever has or does, or that's up to her. But for her to say that, and for that to be something that I connected to religion at a really early age, when that was not a conversation we had in my home, was very interesting. That's never left me. And when somebody is giving you a morality lesson, when somebody is telling you the difference between right and wrong, you got who's writing that story. And that's kind of, and that relates to how I look at politics, how I look at race, how I look at economics. Who is telling me what is good and what is bad? And what do they have to gain by elevating one thing and suppressing another? So when you kind of think of it that way, that really planted a seed for me.
My mom did talk about this a lot to me. She read a book growing up about don't believe the fairy tale. If anybody's in my mom's age group, she's in her 70s, where it was like, don't believe the Cinderella story. No man is going to come and save you. And she would tell me that multiple times. But honestly, I still had a part of me that thought getting married, because I got married in my first marriage right out of college, I thought I was going to be saved and taken care of. So even though she told me that wasn't true, I still kind of bought into it anyway.
I did too. And a lot of that was cultural messaging. I really thought my job was, because I'm very honest in the stuff that I talk about. I tried to go to college so many times, y'all. I tried and tried and tried. It never really took. I finally graduated with my bachelor's when I was 32. right when I thought, okay, well, I sucked at college. Like I knew I was smart, but I was like, oh, I sucked at college. So I'm gonna have babies and get married. And so that's what I did. And my son very famously said to me one day when I was studying, because this will come up as we talk about gender roles, right? I'm studying in the basement. My kids know that it is school study time. He's probably like 7 years old, and he walks right past his father and down 2 flights of stairs to come to me in the basement and ask me a stupid question. Like I'm sure it was related to juice or something. And I was like, I'm studying. This is study time. You need to go talk to your dad. He literally walked past his father. And and he said, you know what, Mom, this is why you go to college before you have kids. And he spun on his heel and he walked out of the room. And but again, moms don't get a break, right? Whether you are showering,
it's wrong.
on the phone,
It's wrong.
trying to go to school. So that's kind of, I just wanted to kind of set the scene there and talk a little bit about the cultural messaging, because especially living in a place like Indiana, I mean, we see this all the time in our politics here. Like even what is considered like extreme or liberal in Indiana is probably pretty moderate in a place like Chicago or in a place like New York State. But here, everything is kind of skewed because we are a very conservative place.
And a very religious, where I'm at in Palmyra, very religious.
Same here.
And so I
more
talked
churches
about
than anything else.
I talked about this in the episode yesterday with Brian Zimmerman, the Special Forces veteran. I said the women in my neighborhood work way too hard. They have a job. They take care of their kids. They put everybody first before them. It's hard for them to get out in a workout or to eat healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stressed out a lot of the time. And I just see them and my heart breaks for them, because that is what our culture is telling them they need to do. And then if they're also going to a church that says, we put the man's things first, the man makes the decisions, the man's in charge of finances, and you are just sitting back listening and doing everything for everybody and putting yourself way down that list of priorities, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't equal a well satisfied woman. And I love these people. I love them. They're my friends. And I'm kind of battling myself with, how do I gently encourage them to do a little more for themselves?
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to like set the scene there. And I'm glad that we, you know, dipped into religion a little bit, because that definitely plays a role in how we look at women and roles in societies. And I want to take this all the way back, because even when we were talking about racism and systemic racism in our series in February, there's certainly in a right-leaning political kind of narrative that this is just, you know, woke propaganda. When you're talking about something like systemic racism or diversity, equity, and inclusion, that this is somehow a new invention, right? Feminism is also something that is not a new invention. It is not an American invention. It is not from the 19th century. It is not from the 20th century. We're going to go all the way back to Plato, y'all. So in the time of Plato, who was alive 300, 400-ish BCE, he talked in his writing about...
like 2,300 years ago? When is that?
23... Yeah. So 2,400 years ago. Yeah. Crazy. Right. So he wrote that women possess natural capacities that are equal to men, that are suitable for governing and defending ancient Greece.
Hey,
right.
Big heart to Plato.
Hey, Plato, thank you so much.
And how brave back then. Wow.
Right. And how, and again, like so much like we talked about with the race stuff and the immigration stuff. And okay, was this written today or was this written yesterday? Was this written in 300 BCE? Right. Because of course, not everyone agreed with him. And one of the biggest objectors was a guy, Marcus Porcius Cato. So Marcus Porcius Cato, such a fun Greek name. He said, as soon as they become your equals, they will become your superiors. And that quote, again, could be written today. The fear of equality, whether it is equality in race, equality in gender, equality in economic status, equality in education, The fear of equality, meaning superiority, eventually leading to dominance, is such a common thread. And so the fear that if you put women next to us, eventually they're going to be superior to us. And to me, that's an acknowledgement that women are amazing. Because if you have to maintain power through force and through fear and through dominance, then you haven't really earned that power.
A new saying I just learned yesterday is the easiest way to control people is through fear.
Yep.
And so as soon as they're meeting people like Corinne Strait and Destiny Wells and these awesome women out there that have great ideas to take us out of bad places, the fear sets in, and then they start saying comments like that. You better control these women and tamper it down.
Because, and when you read something like that from Plato, nothing that he is saying is derogatory towards men, right? He is talking about natural capacities that are possessed by both men and women that are actually complementary and lead to a stronger society, lead to a stronger form of governance, needing each other. He's talking about complementary skill sets, and that can be taken and twisted into a derogatory slam against men is also very common to what we hear as criticisms of feminism today. Is feminism is wanting to dominate men or wanting to overthrow men or hurt men in some fashion.
And when you look, it's not less rights for men.
Nope. Everybody gets a slice of pie.
If women are treated better, men are also treated better. And that's the thing they don't want you to know.
And that is why feminism and women's issues are so regularly marginalized, and they're called, special interests in an election. Something like family leave, paid family leave, or childcare is called a women's issue, a niche issue, a special interest issue. And it's not at all. So I kind of want to go through some of the earlier examples of feminists and some writing, and we're going to go overseas for some of this.
Cool.
And then in part 2, I actually want to pick up in kind of where we picked up in part 3 for our Reconstruction series. I want to pick up in the 1950s and 60s and get into the second wave of feminism, which brought us towards the Equal Rights Amendment, which was passed by Congress but never actually ratified to become law, and kind of the counter forces that were happening and the criticisms of second wave feminism, which is very much criticized for its emphasis on white women and marginalizing women of color and marginalizing LGBTQ plus women. So there are definitely criticisms there as well. So I kind of want to get into that latter 20th century in the next episode, but we'll kind of build some of the blocks leading up to that in this episode.
Okay, before you start, this sounds fascinating. I just want to throw out that I listened to an Adam Conover podcast called Factually, I think like a year ago. He had a woman on that wrote a book about why women have very rarely been in power. It's mostly been men since humans have been alive. And she tries to answer the question why. And there's really one reason why. Do you want to take a guess?
I have a couple of guesses, but what does he say?
She said.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. She said it's because we're the ones having the babies.
Oh, yeah.
Since we're having the babies, we have to be controlled. We have to be contained because any man could get you pregnant. So you got to make sure it's the man that's in power that wants to keep the land and that his children take on the land. And so women have to be controlled because we're the ones having their children. And so if we changed it, if we reversed it and men were the ones having the children, it would probably be very different.
Oh, it would be completely different.
And I thought that was really interesting. It makes sense when you think about it. It's like, oh, of course. The basic principles, when you get down to just human life.
The basics. And just the logistics of that as well, because even if you have a very normal, healthy, active pregnancy, there's still the act of giving birth, which will make you physically weak and unable to physically defend yourself for a period of time, whether it's days or weeks.
I think for a long period of time, about 50% of women died in childbirth. So the chances that you're going to survive it.
Yeah. So when you look at that just from a logistics standpoint, there's an opportunity for for physical isolation or physical dominance when someone is giving birth or recovering from giving birth, and we'll get into a little bit of that here too. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because there is this overarching kind of umbrella term, and it is called in some places the women inferiority doctrine. And it is just this general overarching belief that women are inherently by birth inferior to men, inferior physically, intellectually, spiritually. Those are kind of the main three categories. And we can find the exploration into great detail into the women inferiority doctrine when we do readings from Charles Darwin and those who teach Darwinism. So women's inferiority doctrine is a huge tenet of Darwinism. It is a huge tenet of evolutionary theory.
I did not know that.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And this is because the whole theory of Darwinism, and if there's anybody who's listening that right now that is just like, oh my God, am I going back to ninth grade biology? Like, I promise we're going to make it more fun than ninth grade biology. But they're like, I was not here for Darwin, but we got to be here for Darwin because Darwin has screwed us on this one again. But the whole theory of Darwinism is survival of the fittest, right? It's the strongest, most dominant species, most dominant beings within that species are the ones that survive and evolve and reproduce and evolve and reproduce and evolve and reproduce. So there's all of these factors that come into who is choosing who they reproduce with. And this is across all mammals. So this is not just related to humans. This is across all mammals, that the women of the mammal, the female of the mammal, is inherently inferior. And that is because women, according to Darwin's theory, we're domestic creatures. We're not tested in an evolutionary fashion. We are not sent out to war to see if we are going to survive. We are not sent out to fight for our mate, like many mammals fight for their mates, humans too. It's disgusting. But like many mammals will go out and fight another male for the mate. So whichever male survives gets to reproduce. They have evolutionarily been tested. Women have never really been tested. We've never been tested. We just get to be, and therefore we have not truly evolved. And this dominates. And so that is a way, because I think a lot of times when we look at especially feminism and patriarchal context and construct in a place like the US, we tie it a lot to religion. And of course, religion and certain interpretations of religion do place women as the weaker of the two between women and men. It's not inherently a Christian tenet or a tenet of Islam or a tenet of Judaism. It's actually kind of wrapped up in a lot of societal interpretations, a lot of government applications of religious interpretation, and this inferiority doctrine that is so pervasive. And so when you look at, but like you just said, Sarah, women are dying in childbirth at alarming rates, really until the 1920s, 30s, 40s. I mean, you were about half and half likely to survive and die giving birth to a child. And so to me, I'm like, well, that's a test, right? Is that not an evolutionary test? Is that not who's going to be there to reproduce, not the person who dies? But so all of that's
where you get those comments like she's got childbearing hips and stuff.
She's got the childbearing hips, right? She
looked like she could produce some babies.
Oh, that's been, I remember somebody saying that about me.
I've had stuff like that said to me. Yep.
When
I just want to pause and say this is mind blowing, but it also makes complete sense, and how my own mind has had to really change in the last few years. I honestly believed until recently that men were better at physical activities than me because I had been told it my entire life. And it was like, it really wasn't. My husband's very physically fit. He works out. He lifts weights. It wasn't until I really realized when we got on our exercise bike, which we had to get an extra special one so it could go high enough for my legs, and I saw what level he was working on, and he was at 70 something and I'm at 91, and that I can go harder and longer than him, then I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are we not always second And then I'm like, I'm pretty physically fit. I bet I could outrun most men. I'm sure
Hmm.
there's tons that are faster than me and can go longer,
Yeah.
but I bet I'm faster than most people. And it was like, because all I was thinking about was the arm strength.
Yeah.
My husband's arms are way more massive than me, but running and biking and endurance and pain, I've went through a lot of painful things in my life. Maybe we shouldn't be acting like women are the weaker sex. Are we?
Hmm. And
I
again,
think it depends on what specific thing you're talking about.
it goes back to who makes the rules, who decides why, who decided that being able to pick up something that is bigger than someone else is the measure of strength. There are so many areas when you look at, and this comes up a lot when, especially we've heard recently from our new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, talking, expressing his views that women do not belong in combat roles. And there are so many veterans and active service members, and of course there are plenty that agree with him, but there are many that are coming out and are talking about the same thing that Plato talked about in 300 BCE: complementary skill sets, complementary skills. There are even people who have talked about situations where just the smallness of a woman came in handy because of a place that they had to fit. Now,
Right.
me, it's hard to tell. I'm the size of a man, so that does not apply to me. I'm not going to help
Pretty
you in that vein.
amazing of you, Corinne.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
But like smaller hands, more dexterity, more flexibility, just the physical. So when you're telling me, and this comes up a lot when we look at athletic fitness, military fitness, who is making the rules of the test? Who is saying that 50 push-ups in a minute, which we know based on the physical makeup of our body is going to be easier for a man than it is for a woman? Why have you decided that 50 push-ups in a minute is the metric? What if I decided that bleeding for 9 days out of a month is the metric? Who's going to be better at that? What if I decided who can give birth is the metric? Now, somebody's going to tell me, well, that's silly because that man can't give birth. I'm going to say that's also silly because I don't have the pectorals of a man because I have breasts. I have mammaries that serve a different biological function. So why are you choosing a biological function that a woman is going to be less able to perform? And this is not all women, I am generalizing, of course, but on a whole, push-ups are much easier for a man. And so when you watch the kinds of things that are put in testing, push-ups, pull-ups, chin-ups, things like that, that are always going to be easier for men.
Do you know what's so important? Running for a long period of time. And you know which gender does better at that? Women. Women can do marathons better. That's the reason they separated marathons from man and woman, because women were winning. And so as soon as that started happening, first they wouldn't allow women, then
No,
women did it illegally. And then
rest like a man.
finally,
Yep.
when women started winning, they're like, we're separating this
Uh-huh.
immediately.
Yep.
So I would think between a push up and running longer, it depends on the situation.
Yep.
It's not
Again,
always just who can do more push ups.
so it's like, but again, it's like it's generalizing, right? It's generalizing, and it's saying where are we putting our emphasis on what is important or what is the most valuable skill. You look at someone like a horse jockey, for example. They want people who are very, very tiny. Horse jockeys are very tiny people. They do not want large, strong men because you're too heavy for the freaking horse. So there are so many varieties that are happening that give you priorities over different things. So just the bare bones, men are stronger, therefore they are better, it's a false argument, because who is deciding what is better? And
I would
all
think
of that.
a lot of people in the world today still think that, because I literally just figured it out myself like a year ago. And I'm like, how sad is that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and
So,
you look at, and it's not to say that there are plenty of women who are not meeting those physical requirements, because of course there are. But if we would say, okay, well, now our next thing is going to be toe touching, who's more flexible? Who's going to be able to? Okay, then the women are going to win at that one. That's going to come in handy in these sort of environments. That's going to come in handy in this sort of situation. So who is writing the rules? When you look at an institution like the military, women have not been writing the rules. So when the rules and the tests and everything are made and written by men, it's going to be biased, which is why we talk about things like diversity and equity being important, representation mattering, because you want to have a rounded.
Writing the rules, and then men are the main ones in these roles, in the roles that they are setting up for. How do we grow as a society and get better?
We need, then there has to be a recognition. There are so many men who are very good at this as well, but a recognition of the benefits that come to an organization, to a community, to a family, when there are different experiences happening and different skill sets being brought. And one is not better than the other. It's just different.
And how well they work together. Like, I'm really proud of my marriage, which is a lot of work. I've been married to Chris for 8 years. And when we are working well together, his strengths with my strengths, we can do just about anything. And I need him. We have very different strengths and weaknesses. So the two of us together, great working team. Think about all these situations when it was just men in the positions of power. If they would have also included an intelligent woman that was good at the same things but had different skills, think how better society would be if that had always been the case.
Yep. And very similar to how we looked at the lack of advancement opportunities that were given to Black Americans until very recently. They have had such a delayed start. Look at the same thing for women. We are looking at such a delayed start. I always laugh when somebody talks about, comparing, men and women athletes. Well, women didn't even have the opportunity to compete in high school sports until the 1970s. So talk about men competing in sports, just looking at something as basic as sports for hundreds of years before women even had the opportunity. So, and then you get into all of the disparities around funding and everything else you're not comparing apples to apples. Team. Yeah. You're not comparing apples to apples, right? You're comparing somebody who has had a 200-some year head start.
I just want to give a shout out to all the women that were good at whatever particular sport and wanted to compete and weren't allowed to. And then a shout out to all the women that, like I said, did the marathon anyway, did the event anyway, did it next to them.
Yep.
To say, I can do this too. The bravery involved and how that helps push our culture for the better. I'd just like to do a shout out to all of those women. I feel so much gratitude for them, because I've been asked before, have you been asked this question? What time period would you like to be born in if you could pick any? And I'm like, today, because women have had less rights the farther back you go. So today, and maybe honestly in Indiana, just a couple years ago, when we still had our rights to healthcare. So maybe just a couple years ago.
I always answer that question of, I don't need to go back. I know what's back there. Yeah. If I could pick a time, give me 200 years in the future. Give me 500 years in the future.
See, I'm a little worried about the earth in 500 years. So I don't know about that.
That's kind of why I want to see it. I'm like, let's see, like, what's happening around here? Like, are the dinosaurs back? Like, I'm excited. I kind of want, I don't need to go backwards. I've already seen all of it. I definitely
don't want to go back. Yeah.
Not good for any of us. I remember my mom's story that made me laugh was I used to be obsessed with those American Girl books when I was younger, and Samantha was my favorite because she was the Victorian girl. She's like the 19 teens and 20s, and I said, oh, I would love to have been born. I was kind of romanticizing that time. Like, I would love to have been born in the 1920s. And my mom just goes, ugh, imagine having your period in the 1920s. Like, it was like, right? Because we're talking like cloth towels, right? Like belted to yourself.
In Jesus's time, women were like unclean and had to go hide the whole time.
Oh yeah, you couldn't even see them. Just like,
if they saw you, they were horrified. Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's menstruating. Oh.
She's unclean.
So the women inferiority doctrine, it plays a prevalent role, and you'll see this. So not only when somebody like Pete Hegseth talks about military readiness or combat readiness, we also see this when it comes to educational opportunities or income. Do women even deserve to earn the same amount of money as a man? Some people don't think that they even do. And that is all related to this inherent belief of inferiority. And bouncing it back to Plato's time real quick, at this time when Cato said, if we make them our equals, they're going to become our superiors. There was a huge uprising of women in Greece. It was they were protesting what was called the Oppian Law, which was the law that did not allow women to own gold or any other property. And this law was overturned. Their protest worked, and the law was overturned. So this is 300 BCE, where women are protesting for their right to own gold and other items and property. So this literally is a tale as old as time. I will not start singing the song from Beauty and the Beast, but I could, but I won't. And you're welcome that I won't sing it. So that inferiority doctrine has seeped into all of these other areas of our culture. And so that's kind of the umbrella thing that I want us to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this journey. And the two biggest fights for women around the world have always been the right to vote and the right to education, because we understand how powerful those two tools are, and we understand how easy it is to manipulate someone and manipulate a population when they are uneducated and do not have any civic engagement. And so being able to control someone, you deprive them of education and you deprive them of their right to vote, and they are much easier to control.
And then you deprive us of their thoughts and feelings and growth.
Yes.
And able to help society.
Yeah. Yep. And I say this all the time in the videos that I make on TikTok when we're looking at certain voter restrictions. It's like, don't tell me that your vote doesn't matter, because if it didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to make it harder to vote. They wouldn't be trying to restrict it. And so the men in power understood how powerful education was and understood how powerful the right to vote was, which is why they didn't want to give it to women. And to kind of give us a long view here, the Seneca Falls Convention, which happened in the United States, which was the first gathering in Seneca Falls, New York, the first gathering of the women's rights movement, took place in 1848. That is when they started working on women's right to vote. And it would take them over 70 years to get there.
And just for women, or white women.
White women, exactly. Yeah. And Frederick Douglass, very famously during this time, as women were working on suffrage, he said, I don't understand how we can fight for Black men's right to vote when we aren't giving it to women. So there were people during that time, Black men during that time, who understood a loss for me is a loss for you. A gain for me should also be a gain for you. This should not just be a preservation of the white man's ability to vote. And if Black men receive the right to vote, it's a victory, but it ain't enough because the women still can't vote. And so I put that in context of especially what we are dealing with now, especially when we want instant gratification. We want everything to change by the next midterm. We want everything to change in 4 years with the next president. It's not going to change. It's going to take a long, long time. And the women, so many of the women, I would say probably, actually all of the women who gathered in 1848 did not live to see women received the right to vote in 1920. And so when you look at someone who is willing to dedicate their life's work to something that they will not see in their lifetime, that is a commitment. That is a real commitment. And the same people who say, Indiana, Democrats, what's the point? You keep losing. So that's, again, how we're going to measure the value of someone's work, the quality of someone's life, is whether or not they're winning by someone else's metrics. It's putting in the work, it's laying the groundwork, it's planting the tree that you're never going to get to enjoy the shade from. So that's kind of the long game thinking. And when I think of 1848, these women knew they weren't going to be alive if this ever came to fruition. And I think that's really powerful.
I feel really thankful that they did this for us, for all of society. And it just makes me think of the parallel of what you and I and so many other women and great advocates and great men in Indiana are doing right now, fighting for women's right to health care. Mm-hmm. We are second-class citizens now in Indiana. We have women dying because they didn't get proper care in hospitals. And there's fear propaganda, a lot of fake things about, baby killers and stuff. And they don't understand that having pregnancy is very complicated and women die from it. And the government cannot be involved or women die trying to have children. Women that never wanted an abortion are dying because of it. You cannot control women in this way and save babies. all you do is hurt women and children.
Yes.
And they're lied to so much with the fear thing we talked about at the beginning. And I'm just not going to stop.
Hmm.
Are you going to stop
Absolutely
fighting for
not.
this? Then
And if it,
so when are we going to get it back? I don't know, but I'm never going to stop fighting for it until my last breath.
hmm
So I have a lot of compassion for these women that fought for the freedom to vote. I feel very understanding in why they
hmm
did it, knowing they might not never get to, but they hope that their daughters or granddaughters would.
hmm
Yeah.
And I also, I mean, and we'll get into some of this next week when we talk a little bit about like the second wave of feminism. It, when we look at something like suffrage or abolition of slavery, the way that we want to paint these versions of history are a good versus evil battle. And we talked so much during Reconstruction of even how somebody who could be an abolitionist, who could be against slavery, could still be in favor of segregation. And there were many women who were fighting for suffrage who were only fighting for white women. There are famously women in the American suffrage movement who were eugenicists, who believed in the bunk science of eugenics.
Eugenics.
Eugenics. Holy crap! I could only say eugenicist. Eugenics. So there are problematic people, but that's what happens because humans are multifaceted. Humans are not black and white. Everyone is on a spectrum, and you can be working towards a common goal and still acknowledge that there were people with shortcomings and there were people who were ignorant in their time, because that argument is very frustrating when you talk about women's right to vote and people say, oh my God, but Susan B. Anthony, or oh my God, but look at this woman, look at this. Why are you picking apart the individuals in an attempt to negate the overall goal? So that is you saying women shouldn't have the right to vote because maybe that woman sucked or we don't agree with what she said. That's not what we're doing here. And you have to be willing to take all of it, the good and the bad, the complicated pieces of it, recognizing that these people are going to be flawed in a variety of ways. And it doesn't mean that their fight wasn't good. It doesn't mean that women shouldn't have the right to vote because Susan B.
You mean we can fight for something good and not be perfect?
Yeah. Isn't that something? You can make mistakes. You can be flawed.
I love Destiny Wells.
Yeah.
And all the stuff that's going on with her. It's very similar to this stuff. People, a woman in power, trying to change things for the better, trying to save all Hoosiers, and the individual little nasty things they try to say about her to bring her down is disgusting me since I'm in this world and I'm hearing about it.
And we hear the same thing, not only from women, but from people of color, from immigrants, from members of the disabled community. Like, I have to be 10 times better than everybody else.
Think about the Obamas. Have you read, I read Barack Obama's book about he's writing a part 2, but I read part 1 about his presidency. And he's like, we have to be perfect because we're the first Black president and first lady. We have to be perfect. We cannot do anything wrong.
All the time.
And they were still scrutinized for like a tan suit or whatever. And it doesn't matter how perfect you are. If you're doing something new and you're some type of minority, they are going to nitpick you because it's so easy, because our culture is still against that difference.
Yep. And that, and the idea, especially as it plays into how women are perceived, that it needs to come from a soft place, that it should be soft. It should be pleasant. Keep your vote. Keep smiling. Don't
have you been told to smile more? Because I've gotten that thousands of times.
I get told that all the time.
Older men look at me and I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about some complex problem in my head, and they look at me in line and they go, smile. And I'm like, why are they telling me smile? And it's so many times.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the same people who will listen to some like conservative radio bro scream about bathrooms, like will turn around and see a video of me where I'm not smiling and I'm just talking, and will be like, oh my God, you're so hateful. You're so angry and you're so hateful. So that when you don't represent,
you get a lot of that. You're much more famous online than I am, and the sexism you get is pretty powerful, and I think you handle it really well, but it kind of hurts my heart that I see some of the comments and they make me want to throw up, and you kind of get a lot of it.
And it doesn't bother me. It sucks that people that I care about have to see it.
You're right.
Because
Because
I
it
know it's
bothers me probably more than it bothers you because I love you and you're
yeah.
strong and tough. And while I know that, I still love you so much.
Yeah. And it's the same. It's for the same for my kids, for my husband, I asked my mom one time, like, do you read the comments on my videos? And she goes, no. I'm like, good. Don't read them.
I agree. If you
And
love Corinne Straight,
yeah,
don't read the
don't read
comments.
them. And
Yeah.
I know it's hard. It's hard. My husband will get in there sometimes and he'll say something back, and it's very funny, because he's funny and
He's
I
smart.
laugh.
He's funny
Um,
smart.
he's funny, smart, and I laugh. But I know that it's not easy for other people to see. And you're so right, Laura. And when you
This is
smile
great.
more, they accuse you of being condescending or fake, right? So it doesn't matter
It
what you
doesn't matter what
do.
we do or wrong. It
One of
doesn't
my
matter.
favorite shows of all time, and as we are in Women's Month, I will plug this show because it's a beautiful show by women called Broad City, with Abby Jacobson and Alana, what was her last name? Oh shoot, I forgot her last name now. But anyway, they are brilliant comedians. They did a show called Broad City, and they walked past a man on the street who told them to smile, and they just put up both of their middle fingers and they made a smile on their face like this as they walked by him. And it cracks me up. It's a GIF that comes up all the time in my phone, but that's what I think of every time somebody tells me to smile. I'm like, oh, you want me to smile? I'm not going to do it like a lady. So as we look at, I'm going to get back to the timeline here. As we look at kind of the fight for voting rights, which was not only taking place in the United States, this was a worldwide fight for suffrage.
And suffrage means the right for women to
The
vote.
right for women to vote, yes. And the very first country that allowed women to vote was actually New Zealand in 1893.
I did not know that. Go New Zealand.
You go New Zealand. Australia.
They've had a women prime minister, which
They have.
Still have not. We have not had a woman president in America. So
sure haven't, and there are so many reasons why, and we can get into that too. But yeah, New Zealand was first. Australia was close behind in 1902. Finland was in 1906. So those were kind of the first three. There was kind of a cluster there, and then there were a couple of countries that did it without. With restrictions, which I also thought was really interesting. So the UK allowed women to vote if they were over the age of 30. That was in 1918. Of course, here in the US in 1920, that right was extended only to white women. In Canada, the right to vote was extended to all women except Canadians of Asian descent and Indigenous Canadians, Indigenous women. And so if you were a woman of Asian descent, like born in Canada, but if your grandparents were Asian, you didn't get the right to vote until the 1940s. And if you were an Indigenous Canadian woman, you did not have the right to vote until the 1960s. It was very much part of the kind of the civil rights era reckoning that was happening in the US that kind of bled over into Canada. And there was a huge movement of Indigenous people. So that was the 1960s that Indigenous Canadian women got the right to vote. Wow. So again, how many hundreds of years did everybody else have a head start? We have to look at progress. All of these other people were on third base, and Indigenous women in Canada, Black people in America were just stepping up to bat. So the game has been so skewed. And then
America is such a Christian nation. And if you study the white people that came over, it wasn't all white people that came over because of religious reasons. It was usually about half on the boat, but they were the ones with the power.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the history of that, we're still seen as pretty religious extreme compared to a lot of developed countries around the world. And if you look at the founding of religion, which maybe one time we can get into religion a little more.
I would love to.
You really see that comes just hand in hand with women not being equal, because that was passed down as a religious thing, a Christian thing. Women listen to the man gets the money, all that. It just all ties together.
All together. Yep. And so when you have those cultural values or those religious values, reflected in your societal values, reflected in your secular laws, it just becomes so much harder to undo. So financial freedom, the ability to own property, all of these things that took well past the 1960s and 70s, for women to have that kind of ownership, because any rights that were extended to women when it comes to financial rights, economic rights, were tied to marriage. They were tied to their husband. And so
So it was
single women,
your dad, and
Mhm.
then if something happened to your dad, if you had a brother or an
Brother,
uncle,
hmm,
and then if you got married. So
yep,
that's the Jane Austen world where
yes,
they've got to find, they got to find the husbands for their five daughters, the Pride and Prejudice story,
hmm,
on how the mom was just obsessed with it, and it makes sense why she was obsessed with it because she wants to make sure her children aren't poor if
yes,
something happened to her husband.
hmm,
So that was that whole thing, which was very real for a very long time.
yep, and very, she was a revolutionary writer. Somebody who really didn't get have the full appreciation of their work, until many, many years after she was gone. So, and we'll see that with some of the other women, especially writers, because that was their only medium in so many spaces. They were not allowed to go speak at the pulpit. They were not allowed to go speak at an event or a rally. So they wrote. And sometimes just writing under the name of a man gave them credibility. And so looking at voting, because I also thought that this was really interesting. So when we look at the most recent rights to vote, women received the right to vote in Bhutan in 2007. In the United Arab Emirates, women voted for the first time, and actually everybody voted for the first time in 2006 because that was their first democratically held election. And in Kuwait, women first got the right to vote in 2005. In Afghanistan, interestingly, Afghanistan won independence over Britain in 1919, and that is actually when women got the right to vote in Afghanistan, was
Wow.
1919. But they have lost the right to vote and gained it back and lost it and gained it back over and over and over again over the past 100 years, which again is so indicative to what we are going through now, the recognition that, oh, these rights are not permanent. There's nothing that
That's
is absolute.
Oh
And
man,
the
I did
women
not
of that,
realize that. And I literally didn't realize that until Roe v. Wade got struck down.
mhm,
I literally just assumed blindly and stupidly that we wouldn't lose rights. We're a democracy. We would do the
mhm,
right thing. The people in power would keep rights and just add more. But that's not the way the world works. History keeps repeating itself, and now we're in a cycle where how many rights are people going to lose
yeah.
until we get more involved in our government and take it back?
And we can never say that we won't lose the right to vote in the US as women. We can't say that. We are already seeing other pieces of legislation, that are specifically targeting immigrants, specifically targeting someone who has had their name changed, who is going to be traditionally women who have changed their name due to marriage or whatever. Different. Remember, we talked about this. If y'all have not listened to our Reconstruction episodes, go listen to it, because despite federal law, right, people gonna people. Racist gonna racist, misogynist gonna misogyny. And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to find ways. Okay, I'm gonna make it a little bit harder for you, woman, because you changed your name. I'm going to make you go jump through four other hoops that your husband is not going to have to jump through because his name never changed. Now you've got four more hoops to jump through. Go figure out the time to go to the license branch, to go get your passport, to go get your birth certificate. And when those obstacles are put in the way, it lowers the likelihood that someone is going to vote, because it is a logistical nightmare. Anyone who's been married, divorced, changed their name, it's an effing nightmare. I think I didn't get my name back on my license until I was divorced for almost 5 years, because who wants to go to the license branch? And my license
I've
wasn't
had my
expired.
name changed 3 times, and
Yeah.
when I ran for state house, a bunch of new voters could vote for me in Floyd County, where I taught for 18 years. But a lot of those years I taught, I had a different name.
Uh,
So it even hurts in elections because part of the thing that helps you is name recognition.
100%.
Um, I've had a lot of complex feelings about that. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I have one kid with a different name than the other two. It's a whole thing with women that I don't think maybe not all men realize how difficult it is. It is your identity.
It is. And I remember when I changed my name back to my maiden name, which is different than my kids. I had conversations with them about it, and I'm telling them why it's important to me. And they immediately got it. They're like, it's your name, Mom. This is my name. That's yours. Whatever you. So it was an understanding of them that I need to feel okay about my name, just like they need to feel
And
okay
my
about
kids
it.
get it too. They all understand it, but we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I had to get, I'm okay with it. I'm
Yeah.
fine with it. Luckily, my husband has a great name. I think Blessing's a good name.
It is a
But
good name.
yeah,
I know if I
but it
ever
is
change my
complicated
name
because you're
again,
changing your identity. You're
it
changing who
is.
you are. And I
Mhm.
had to just come to a place where it's okay. I'm comfortable in me. It's all right. But
Yeah.
I think it's hard. And I know women that didn't take their husband's name. And I
Mhm.
know women that have had children and they've named one of them their husband's last name and one of them their last name. I
Yeah.
think that's pretty progressive. Like I think that's cool. But I didn't do that and I'm okay with that too. So I think just letting the people choose is the right way.
And I always think it's so, and I know, and respect to anybody who decides to do whatever they want with your name. It's your
Yeah, do
name,
whatever you want. It's your name.
And like, it's funny to me to watch same-sex couples figure this out, because there's no, there's no
Ooh, I didn't
gender.
even think of that.
There's no norm when they're going in. And I've seen so many fun videos of, two men or two women getting married, or even, non-binary folks who are not falling into that gender spectrum. And they're like, we just picked the last name that was cooler. Like, which one is more fun to say? That's the one that we're going with. And there was a lesbian couple, and one of them had an amazing Italian last name. I'm not going to remember what it is, but a fun to say Italian last name. And the other woman's last name was Williams. And she was like, you think we're going with Williams, or we're going with that. We're going with pasta and spaghetti.
Sweet.
And like, it was a whole thing about how fun the Italian name was
Just
to
the
say.
fact that we're supposed to pick the man.
Yes.
I think that's so much better when it comes to okay, what are we gonna do with names? Not
Which one's
we're
more
just
fun?
expected we take the husbands.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my husband, if I ever change my name again, my husband's last name is super fun. It's way more fun than straight. Straight is so boring. And I went to school when I was growing up with like so many kids like that were Greek and Polish and Venezuelan, and these amazing, our neighbors, I think they were like the Stephanopoulos or something. We had the Stavakoviches, we had all these cool, and I'm like, straight. Like, I just felt so boring. So like, if I ever change
You
my name
are
again,
anything but boring, girl. That would
yeah,
be the
it's
last
true.
word I would use to describe you. So I don't. And then you wouldn't. I love the cute thing that Scott Aaron Rodgers came up with, the Corinne straight, with the picture of your hair straight, and then
Straight.
Corinne curly with your hair
Curly.
straight. I love that so much. So
I need that on we need that on a t-shirt. That should be part of our Project Next merch.
we should do it. I love it.
So I wanted to get into a couple of the examples, some very early feminists who are not in the US. And so we're not going to go all the way back to Plato, because we know those women were badasses. They got the right to own gold. So
cool.
Thank you so much, 300 BCE Greek women. There was a movement happening in the UK, in Britain, in the 1700s. And this really corresponded to the French Revolution. So you had dissent happening in England, in Britain. And so the dissenters were people who were breaking away from the Church of England. And we talked about this a little bit ago, about kind of the differences between religion in Europe and religion in the US. Christianity is much more prevalent in US politics than it is in European politics. But you can argue that those countries are actually way more religious than we are. You have the freaking Vatican in Italy, but women in Italy have amazing rights. You have a huge Catholic population in Spain and France, and those women have way more rights than we do. And so there is a very strict separation between church and state in European countries. And the dissenters in the 1700s, in the mid to late 1700s in Britain, that's what they wanted. They wanted that separation. So they actually started their own schools. They had their own kind of way of doing commerce. And there were a couple of very famous dissenters who were women, who wrote a lot about the role of women in religion, in society, and kind of the tangled up mess. And Mary Wollstonecraft is one of these famous writers. She was prevalent in the 1700s, late 1700s. Her most famous book is A Vindication of the Rights of Women. And this was in 1792 that she published this. And prior to that, she had done a lot of writing in pamphlet form. And, and this was also a time where even the people who could read, they're not reading big, long books. Literacy was a pretty rare commodity. And so you're writing things, you're knowing that you're only going to be able to even communicate to a real narrow slice of the population of the people who can read anyway. So much of this was done in a much quicker fashion in these smaller pamphlets. So just kind of a leaflet instead of a big book, something that was less intimidating to someone who maybe didn't have the best literacy skills. And her first pamphlet was about education, because she and her best friend and her sister started a school for girls, and which I love the name where this school was. It was in Newington Green, which I think you have to say it with a British accent, and a posh British accent, because it's Newington Green. So I don't know if Newington Green is still a place, but it sounds pretty cool. I kind of want to go there. So they started a school specifically for girls and women. And she started getting published during this time. And I wanted to hit on her publisher, because this dude's name was Joseph Johnson, and he was known in Britain as a radical publisher. He published the people that nobody else wanted to publish. So he published the feminists and the dissenters and the economic radicals, people who were arguing for economic change, especially people who were very critical of the monarchy. So he was publishing some of the earliest, most brilliant feminist authors who very much were modeled by American feminists. So about 100 years later, American women feminists who are gathering at Seneca Falls are reading the writings of people like Mary Wollstonecraft. So it's kind of this, we're looking at a 200-year time span of where these women kind of start to reclaim some of these texts and start to make parallels between the struggle of women in the UK and the struggle of women in the US. Joseph Johnson, so not only did he publish Mary Wollstonecraft, he also published Priscilla Wakefield. She supported her family actually with her writing. She and her husband, I think, had like 5 kids. This woman raising 5 kids wrote 17 books in 2 decades. So almost a book a year, 17 books in 20 years while she's raising 5 kids. And she supported their family. And I have to read the title of this book from 1798, because talk about something else that should be a t-shirt. This is the title of the book: Reflection on the Present Condition of the Female Sex with Suggestions for Its Improvement.
Oh,
like,
love that.
Is that
so
the
proper?
The most proper, like, I have some thoughts. I want to make sure I'm a lady about it. I have some thoughts of just with suggestions for its improvement.
Factual reasons why women should have more rights.
And it makes me think of if anybody is familiar with Key and Peele, when Key and Peele would do the Obama character, and then he had Luther, his anger translator, because again, Obama as a Black man couldn't be angry. So he had Luther pacing behind him, being his anger translator. I think of Priscilla having an anger translator that is like, listen up to why you people suck and why you're hurting us, and how you can be better, right?
It's boiling under her, and she's like, I will do what I need to do to push the culture for the better. But
it's like she's writing suggestions for improvement, and she wants to say, do better, you assholes. So that is my favorite book title ever.
Thanks for telling us that.
I'm going to try to find that book because I feel like I need it on my shelf. Another woman who was incredibly influential was Anna, and I'm going to try to say her name correctly, Anna Letitia Barbeau. And she actually kind of had her foot in both worlds, in Britain and in France, because her husband was French, and they were revolutionary sympathizers, because this was the time of the French Revolution. So she was a Quaker and a dissenter. So she was somebody who was encouraging the breakaway from the Church of England. And she was a Quaker, but she did not fall into any of the norms of what were expected of Quaker women, which was pretty much to dress a certain way and never have any fun. There's no dancing. There's no fun. And she was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm dressing how I want. And they called it merriment because you couldn't be merry. She's like, I'm going to dress how I want and I will enjoy merriment. I'm going to have fun in my life. And she was a prolific writer. When you talk about the volume of stuff that was written, Barbo probably has the record from this time period because she wrote everything: poems, essays, pamphlets, books, letters. Her letters are what we actually know of her, because the vast majority of her writings were lost in the Great London Fire in the 1940s.
Wow.
In the 1940s. So they survived a while and they were in archives, and most of that was lost during the big London Fire.
Wow.
So much of what we know about her, thankfully, is from memoirs, biographies that were written by her niece and by, I believe, another friend of hers. But her letters were so prolific that is what people have held on to. And she wrote about every policy thing that was happening in the UK. She wrote about the French Revolution. She wrote about the role of women in all of these spaces. She really put forward the narrative that is very similar to what Plato was saying so long ago. When both of us are there, we're all better. When you allow women to have a seat at the table, the men are better and we all are better. And that is a tenet. Like, anytime somebody wants to describe feminism as this radical ideology, at its core, when you talk about being a feminist or you talk about advocating for feminism, it is strictly wanting equality, equal opportunities. That is the bare bones definition. There is nothing radical or angry or scary about that, unless you don't know how to hold on to power, unless you don't know how to collaborate with someone who's different than you. And so when you read all of this writing, that's all these ladies are saying. They're like, y'all are actually better when we're a part of your church. You are better when you let us teach in your schools, because this time period, women were not teaching boys. So even though the profession of teaching has kind of traditionally become one that is for women, women were only allowed to teach girls, and they had to, create their own schools. That's why so many of these women started their own schools, because they're like, all right, I want to educate girls, I better start a school. This again goes back. There are so many things that I could make like the creepy, like thumbtacks and red string on the board and connect it back to Plato and Cato, of what this quote from her that I'm going to read. She was also a master. So this is Anna Letitia Barbo. She was a master at sarcasm, and a master to the point that so many people misunderstood her. And she really didn't have a resurgence in power until the 1930s and 40s, when people started rereading some of her letters and her texts. And because her sarcasm was so thick, it was so much of that dry British sarcasm, she was very misunderstood for a long time. And there was a movement in the UK for dissenters. So people who had said, I'm breaking from the Church of England, they were stripped of their citizenship. They were stripped of their civic rights. So they couldn't vote. They didn't have certain civic privileges because the Church of England was punishing them. So there were all of these movements in the late 1700s to give dissenters back their rights. And after one of these latest attempts in Parliament failed, Anna Letitia Barbo wrote this, and this is dripping with sarcasm, so you have to hear it in a sarcastic voice. We thank you for the compliment you paid to us dissenters, when you suppose that the moment they are eligible to places of power and profit, all such places will be filled with them. And it's hearkening back to what Cato said: if you give women equality, they will soon be your superiors. So she is saying, you are so afraid of dissenters that if you give them their power back, your spaces will then be filled with them. And that this was so misunderstood by so many people that read it, and that the vote failed. And she could say, thank you so much. You've given us a compliment because you're recognizing our power. You're recognizing that you're threatened by us. So thank you. You voted down this resolution because you're afraid of us. And there is so much of that you see over and over and over again in the fight for suffrage, in the fight for equal rights, for equal pay. We can't give you that because then you're going to take it all. Well, you've just paid me a compliment. In the words of Anna Barbo, you have just paid us a compliment because you are recognizing the power that we have that you are afraid of. And her writings, as they have been evaluated, and as people started to realize how brilliant she was, she's really credited for the more modern feminist movement, not only in Europe, but also in the United States, because she was a pioneer. And this is how she has been described by more modern writing critics and feminist critics. Anna Latacia Barbo neither consented to the idea that a special feminine discourse should exist. So a special place for women to talk should exist. Like, we don't need this special place. Nor did she accept an account of herself as belonging to a realm of the unrational. And this all goes back to women are hysterical, women are emotional, women need their own spaces, they need their own book clubs, they need their own church groups. They're hormonal, right? So Anna Barbo,
emotional people I know are not female.
100%.
I was wrong so many times in my life. I've really learned how to control my emotions in a lot of situations. I think people that have not been told they are wrong thousands and thousands of times get upset a little bit easier. Just throw that out there. It's not anybody's fault. It's just the culture. But do you know how many times I have been told I was wrong when I was not?
I'm going to guess 9,762, because that's probably about the same amount of times I've been told. Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so which I loved reading some of the excerpts from Anna Barbo, because she was so ahead of her time, she was so misunderstood. And her writing is thick with irony and sarcasm. And not until modern feminism and more modern suffrage has the writings of someone like her been truly appreciated. And I think of the idea that women are emotional, irrational, can't be trusted, and what we saw take place in the modern discourse here in the US during the 2016 presidential election, and even the number of women who said, I can't trust a woman to be president. I can't vote for an emotional woman. And there was so, right? You remember this, Sarah, so many people saying, well, haven't men start? Oh, I can't hear you, Sarah. I lost you. No. Oh, no. I'm going to keep talking. We lost Sarah for a second, but I'm going to keep going, because all of y'all remember in the 2016 election that, this is kind of where I think a lot of people started recognizing internalized misogyny. Women themselves saying, I can't trust a woman to be president. This is a man's job. And so when we look at writings in the UK and from other places around the world, going all the way back to the 1700s, the issues are the same. And in addition to when we look at a construct like racism in the United States, and we look at a construct of misogyny or a patriarchal construct, it's not overt. We're not talking about signs that say a woman cannot have a bank account, a woman cannot apply here. Oh no, we still lost Sarah. It's okay. We're gonna figure it out. But we're talking the same thing, right? We're not seeing signs over drinking fountains anymore that say whites only. We're not seeing women cannot apply to work here. We're seeing a covert adherence to a structure that has worked for such a long time. And we can see this structure in place in modern policies. We see this structure in place when it is a resistance to childcare availability, when it is a resistance to paid family leave. The United States is now notorious around the world for not having any federal policy that gives paid maternity leave to somebody for having a child. And the argument traditionally in the United States has always been an economic argument, because we're not going to overtly be misogynist and sexist against women. We're going to covertly preserve the patriarchal structure that has benefited us for so long. And we covertly do that by making a false economic argument. So making a false economic argument that it is too expensive to pay for family leave, it is too expensive to pay for childcare or universal pre-K. When you actually look at the economics, it is too expensive not to, because you see the economic achievements of women in countries that have implemented paid leave, paid sick time, paid childcare, improved healthcare, equal pay amendments, equal representation laws. Women do better economically, and the economic security of everyone fares much better. Because
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can. There
Okay,
we are.
good. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to say, usually sexism, they don't call it sexism. It's just what you were saying. There's something underneath it, like smile more. You don't realize that's sexist.
Yep.
Or she's rude. Well, if she were a man, she'd be a leader. That's great. That's how they're supposed to be. So it's usually undercover. You kind of got to think about it for a minute. And we still haven't had a woman president, and I have to say that hurt really bad. And I really thought we were less sexist in America than we really are. I really didn't want to believe it, but we still have very, very far to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even just my own mind getting out of the culture that I've been fed since I was born in 1980, to just get myself out of it, out of the cloud, and really seeing the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I see a woman president, a good one. I'm not going to pick a bad one. I'm going to vote
Mm-hmm.
for the better person. A good woman president before I die. I really wanted it for my daughter, and it hurt.
Yeah,
It hurt.
it
And
does. And to hear other women, um, that hurts a lot, because the internalized misogyny that comes along with especially the Christian upbringing is incredibly powerful. And the women who keep benefiting from the patriarchal structure because of their relationship to men want to have the same incentive to preserve that structure as the men do, because it is the structure that has benefited them. They don't know any other way. So this is very similar to when we go back and we look at the daughters of the Confederacy, who are lamenting at the loss of slavery, the loss of their lifestyle. They were so excited as little girls to grow up and own slaves in the South, because that's the only life they knew. They were desperate to preserve it. We see the same thing happening with women today. And when I hear women blast feminism and blast fights for equality, when they have no understanding that they can only say that because of feminism. They can only say their opinions and have their podcast and have their voice be heard because of feminism. Their ability to own a car, to have a credit card, to be able to sign a contract would not be possible without feminism. And so you can criticize some of the more modern interpretations if you want to, but you cannot criticize the movement as a whole when it has actually given you your right to maintain your internalized misogyny and maintain the power structure.
yeah.
And we'll go into a lot more of that in the next episode as we kind of pick up with the second wave of feminism.
I'm excited. I really like this topic because it
Me
really
too.
applies to me, and I'm so driven to push the culture for more equality for all the women that are younger than me. I'm just
Yeah,
so driven to help them. Let's make it a tiny bit easier for them, and then
a
let
little
them
bit.
push it and make it a tiny bit easier for the next generation. Let's just keep it going.
And we
So I'm
and
proud of you for doing this. I learned a lot today. Thank you.
I
Amazing
want to leave
girl.
you with a couple of fun fact nuggets,
Okay,
because I
let's
think
hear
these
it.
are fun and I think they really tee us up for next week. And we've talked about, we've never had a woman as a president in the US. That really puts us behind the rest of the world, honestly. But we have had some women as governors, of course. And the very first woman to be governor in the United States. Her name was Nellie Taylor Ross, and she was elected governor in a special election in 1924 after her husband died. So she was the husband of the governor. He died, and they held a special election, and she was actually elected to replace him. That was only in a special election. When the general election came back up, she did not win in a popular vote, so she lost, but she still is the very first governor. The second woman who was governor, which I think is hilarious, her name was Miriam Ferguson. She was the governor of Texas. Oh, so I'll say Nellie Taylor Ross was the governor of Wyoming. So pioneers out there in Wyoming. And then Miriam Ferguson, so she was Miriam A. Ferguson. They called her Ma Ferguson. She was elected after her husband was impeached because of a whole bunch of financial crimes. So he was the governor of Texas. He was impeached. She ran for election, not in a special election, but ran in a popular election. And she said, you vote for me, you get 2 governors in one, because my husband's at home. So don't worry, we're going to do this together. He was impeached, but people really liked him. So she won election, and she won on that platform.
Wow.
So this is all 1924. Okay. Those 2 women were only governors because their husband was governor. The very first time that a woman was elected governor in the US that was not tied to their husband preceding them was in 1975. And that was Ella Grasso of Connecticut.
1975.
So we go 50 years. 50 years. And that kind of, as we get into the 1970s, I felt like that was a really good little fact to throw in there, that on her own, as her own candidate, on her own merits, 1975 was the first woman that was elected.
I got to take it back for just a minute to Harrison County, where I live, Harrison County, Indiana. Commissioners. The commissioners are, I think there's maybe 3. The commissioners say yes or no to county money. It's an important job. And in Harrison County, we had 1 female before, but she was appointed after her husband died. So we've never had a regular election with a female until 2024. This past election, my friend, a Republican, Anissa Kellum, is the first elected woman in Harrison County in today's time. She started in 2025, you all. And she had told me that there were Republican men that said to her friends, who then told it to her, that they did not want a woman as a commissioner. Yeah. So in my county where I live, she had to fight hard, and no chance would a woman that was a Democrat in Harrison County be able to win right now. But she's a genuine good person and one of my friends, and I love her, and I'm glad she won. But
and that goes back to,
don't act like we don't still have stuff, you all.
We absolutely still have it. And how much of that are these men believing in the woman inferiority doctrine and not even knowing what it is, just inherently believing that a woman is not going to be able to
what happens if a woman's in there?
Yep, make decisions, manage money. All of that is inherently is in their gut as a belief, and they don't even know why they hold that belief, because part of it is not wanting to lose power, and the other part of it is a genuine belief that women are incapable. And if we don't understand the roots of that, and we don't understand where it comes from, we can't dismantle it. And hopefully, as we can start having more of these conversations, we can work to dismantle it, and we can work to understand that what we're trying to undo is so long in the making. Just like when it comes to systemic racism,
and we can't lose hope. They want us to lose hope and just stop fighting for it, but never.
No, we're going to keep working on it.
Work together. We work together. We unite, and we keep fighting. I'm thankful to all the males that have joined this fight.
Yeah.
And I'm just, like Frederick Douglass saying, women should vote. A Black man who had been treated terribly and just kept fighting. I'm so appreciative of people like that. Yeah. So thank you for everybody that's listening, that's learning, that's growing. I would love to hear from women. I would love to hear from you. Is there anything that you've realized in the last few years? Oh, wow, I didn't realize this thing was sexist, because I had to go there. I didn't realize Smile More was sexist for a long time. I was just like, I guess I should smile. I don't, So
I
It's
had somebody comment on one of my videos because Indiana is hopefully it will pass, but it is including the tax exemption for menstrual products and for other like adult diaper kind
menstrual
of products.
products are freaking expensive.
They are, and the fact
They're a
that we pay
luxury. I'm sure
taxes
there are a
on it.
bunch of women that are trying to stay housed that cannot afford them because they
Yes.
are expensive.
And the fact that we pay taxes on it, so that's a tax that half of the
And that's something
population is
we
not
need to
experiencing.
have.
And so those there are little things that as you make it adjustments and you understand that it's easy to dismiss. It's easy to dismiss that as saying, oh, it's frivolous, it's stupid. Why are you focusing on that? Because it kind of all stacks up
You just keep
into
working. You get what you can
platform.
get. You keep
Yep.
trying. Let's keep pushing this forward. Let's keep going. Let's make the lives of our children better.
Yep.
Okay. We're
Yep.
going to have an episode on Tuesday. I get the word out with Karen
Yes.
and Instagram influencer Kurt Mullet. He has over 90,000 followers on Instagram and he is fighting for Indiana democracy.
He
And he
sure
also
is.
experienced gatekeeping very similar to Karen. It's almost like they're scared of us social influencers, girl. What do you think?
I think so. I think some people are, Destiny
And
is getting Destiny Wells is getting the pushback. It is kind of funny what's happening within the Democratic Party is why are we afraid of social media? Like this isn't new. We're in our 40s. Like I think Kurt is even older than us, is out of his 40s, older than 40s. And his presence on Instagram is something that is not seen as a benefit, but is being seen as a threat when actually we're all on the same team.
And then those of you that are interested in the Indiana State Dem chair elections, that happens. Today is Friday. It happens tomorrow, Saturday, March 15th. On the Tuesday Get the Word Out episode, we will be uncovering who voted for who and who won. And we are very, very hopeful here at Project Next that it is Destiny Wells who does not want gatekeeping, who is not scared to come out and talk. She did a very amazing episode with me on mental fitness where she talked about her own problems. She even opened up about her own sexual assault, which it was hard for me not to cry. She's brave, badass woman that would take us so far if she's given the chance. But I see the people just terrified at the Central Committee of her. Calm it down, you guys. She's amazing. She's not scary. She's going to help women get our rights back. She's going to help protect public education. She's so smart and amazing. Let's not be so scared of her. So anyway, we'll be reporting on Tuesday at the Get the Word Out episode about that as well. So if you are interested, even if you don't live in Indiana, let's see what happened. Can we all work together as social media influencers? Can we work together and help get the best person elected for Indiana Dem State Chair, which matters so much because we need a better governor.
We absolutely.
I think most people that follow politics, regardless of whether you are an R or D, would admit we probably could. We would really benefit from having not so many extremists in power.
And what we're dealing with in Indiana and a lot of other traditionally red states is very low Democratic voter turnout. And the Democratic apathy is, part of it is our
They've
own
lost
fault.
hope.
Part of it is the fault of Democrats, and part of it is, a strategic strategy, a strategy from the other side to keep people feeling apathetic. And what we need in that state party leadership position is somebody who can energize and somebody who is not afraid to utilize platforms like social media and other public engagement events to get the message out there and to energize an entirely new group of people. And that's why somebody like Destiny Wells, I think, could be the right person. And I'm excited to see what could happen. And it's not to say that the other candidates are bad people. They're not. We're all on the same team.
It's just which one's going to get our rights back faster.
Yep.
Which one's going to save all Hoosiers faster. And that's very clearly the one that wants to stop gatekeeping and wants more people at the table and wants to energize voters.
More people. Yeah. More
so let's see. It's going to be exciting. I'm a little nervous about it. It might be why I keep having this pain here. We'll see.
Let's hope it goes away after tomorrow.
Man, yeah. Let's hope. And I talked to Destiny on the phone yesterday, and I just thanked her and told her I'm there for her anytime that she needs a friend because this is stressful. It's whenever you're doing something huge like this, it's stressful. So yeah, so thanks for those of you that have been watching. And then I did an episode with Brian Zimmerman, who is a special forces veteran, and he's going to do a deep dive about his incredible life, and we summarized his life in an episode yesterday, so check that out if you haven't yet. I'm really thankful I met this person. And Tim Peck is doing okay. He's recovering from surgery.
Good to hear.
I
Way to
miss
go,
him,
Tim.
and I'm glad he's recovering, and I hope he's having a great time, and I hope he's not in too much pain.
Yeah, hope he's lots of sleep and lots of meds. Yeah.
Okay, you guys, thanks, Corinne. This went on a little bit crazy long, but we got stuff to say, girl.
It
and
usually
you're
does.
incredible. Thanks.
We'll be
for being
back
my
next
friend.
week.
We'll be back next week for another Plots and Politics. And thanks for sharing. Share. Send it to a friend. Let's get the more voices that listen, the better we can push the culture for the better. Let's do this, you all. Love you all.
Everybody. Bye.
Bye.